About 3 years ago or so, I was going through what I could only call a great period of mourning. I was mourning for the passing of a sibling, mourning for my old life, and mourning the bonds I had failed to make. Around that time, I was mourning a lack of friends and how painful it was. That's really the only way to put it. Sure, I had people in my life, people who filled a platonic role, but when I really thought about those people, like truly thought, not put up the barriers or put on the mask, I thought to myself, wow, this isn't really a space for me. I knew this for a great deal of time and had said so multiple times to them, but in that same sort of proof of my point, they kind of failed to meet me there in that thought. And as things went on, I found they never would. This other state of mourning, the one of actual loss, put me in this raw position where it's like, oh, I see. This with them will go much as it had with those who had came before. Because there's an inability or a refusal to provide the emotional labor, the comfort. At that time, I saw too clearly where things would go, and so painfully, I knew I had to depart. Now, mind you, this was more than 2 years ago. 2 years ago would have been the point where, yes, 2 years ago would have been the point where the last of them was removed from my life, and I had to accept the grief in full. Shortly after that, though, after one bleeds as they must, I sat out into the world to try and figure out what these friends are. And I found that I had never quite known the answer. It started with me going to some meetups here and there. Crowded little gathering with a bunch of people talking about this or that, and perhaps there was this idea that you just sort of talk about what you want, or I suppose proceed without too much thought. But I found that in all of them, I was just sort of sitting around silently. We weren't, well, they were talking, but I wasn't. I was just there trying to fit in, I suppose, doing the very same thing I spent a lot of time doing with the people I called my friends. Limiting myself, putting myself into a digestible little package that made it easy for me to not push too much against the structure. And of course, fail to be myself. Still, I went to one meetup after the other, trying to figure out the great secret of socialization. And what I found wasn't an answer, it was a realization. I think I just said it. I wasn't showing up as myself. I wasn't being myself. I was waiting for the appropriate moment to actually be the person that I am. And in doing that, I never found it. I made the mistake of thinking that it has something to do with the topic of the meetups, let's say, was like, if it's just a general one, of course it won't work out. It has to be something a bit more specialized. It has to be relative to my interest. And it was actually one relative to my interest that made me see at last, truly, that this was just the wrong way to approach it. The last meetup I tried to go to was for an anime group. And I like anime. I I like anime. Enough that I figured to myself, oh, of course, this is where I need to go. This is where I will be able to fully step out of my shell and be a part of this group. This is where I would go to find friends. And truthfully, it was not. I could have known this from the first of those meetups, but it wasn't until the second one that it really stuck. The first was Blast. What movie was it even? It was something that had came out in theaters. Before Look Back. Look Back was fantastic for the record. But before Look Back, it was some movie or another that a bunch of people had gone off to see. And the idea was that we'd meet up and hang out afterwards. And sure enough, we did. We met up. We hung out afterwards. Went to a Buffalo Wild Wings, was it? Crowded around this rectangular table, and I found myself alienated. Because sitting to either sides of me were not people talking about anime. It was people talking about sports. And I'll be damned if that just wasn't going to work out. Maybe the other side of the table that had no room was talking about the subject we were all supposed to be there for. But this side, they were talking about sports. And I was just there as I used to be with my former friend group. Absently sort of just observing, not really listening because all of it went into one ear and out the other. Part of me thought, damn, maybe I'd have better success on the other end of the table, but also, damn, there was no room down there for me. So we're sitting there, and they're talking about sports for this long stretch. Couldn't get a word in edgewise because, well, where does one start? How does one change the subject? Where does one get the opportunity to focus the camera on something else? I sat there mostly silent, awkwardly silent, one might even say. And again, I hadn't quite found the answer yet. It wasn't time to find the answer yet. So, I left that one not negatively, just sort of neutral. A big fat zero that means nothing and takes nothing away. And tried to interact in the Discord associated with it. Tried to meet these people here, and I found that same disconnect, which I suppose I have to talk about at some point or another. That same disconnect, but still this determination to try, because I was past the grieving point now. This was the point of emergence. I had wrapped myself in a cocoon of grief, and now it was time to emerge as a new me. And I was determined to do that. So I went to another meetup, and this would be the last one I went to. Because this time we went bowling, and it's like there's a orbiting sort of thing one can do. Not about the subject, but this is what you do with your friends, quote unquote, when you're not on that subject. So we went bowling, and this will be the first time I have gone bowling, so I'm fine with it. And I'm finding once again they're talking about sports. It's like stars above. And it's fairly not crowded, but populated Discord. I had managed to get stuck with the people who talked about sports again. And for the entire period of that whole bowling venture, they were just talking about that. It's just like, damn, all I can do is bowl. Because there's nothing I could do here. So I bowl and I bowl and I bowl until it's time for us to go, and the awkward looks were like loud. It was like, yes, I know, I didn't really say anything here because you guys weren't really the people I could say anything to. There was some talk about going to see something or another in November, a screening where they'd rent out a movie hall, and it's like, that's a nice idea, and I'm not going to do it. This still wasn't it. I still hadn't figured out what I was missing. Until I took a step back from that and sat on it. Reviewed myself in this moment, in the previous moment, in the orbiting moments with the other meetup group, in all the years with all those people I used to call my friends, and what I found was that I was just going about it the wrong way. I kept thinking I had to more or less wait my turn to be present. I kept thinking I had seen why this had failed before, so all I had to do was avoid the thing that led to that failure. I kept thinking there had to be a right way, and I wasn't wrong, but I was wrong about my approach. Let's take a step back just a little bit towards one of the things I said to one of those former friends during this great period of mourning, where I was talking about how to make friends, and she would say to me, more or less, be small. Not in those words, not in that sort of same texture, but still be small because you can't show up as yourself. And I felt betrayed by this because she had to have known, surely she had to have known, that I am beyond expansive. I am a lot, and if I show up as small to begin with, when will they ever be prepared to meet me in my entirety? She had told me to do that because, hypothetically, it worked for her. She could only tell me what worked for her, but that wasn't what I needed to hear. I had to figure out what would work for me. And I think I sort of figured out that I can't look for people. And I certainly can't make them feel, let's say, comfortable with my presence. Because one then has to ask themselves, when will they be comfortable enough? When will they see a need or find a desire to say, you know what, I'm prepared for this guy? When are they going to say, yo, this is who I want if I'm never who I am? The confusion was thinking, the mistake was thinking that I failed before, when rather than having failed, I simply wasn't where I was meant to be. You can't fail a math test in English class. You shouldn't be doing math in that class in the first place, hypothetically. Who knows how the curriculum has changed nowadays, but the point is, you can't fail a math test in an English class because the English class isn't testing you on math. You can't fail at making friends because when a person isn't for you, they're merely not for you. And that's really it at the end of the day. When I think back on all of those people I used to call my friends, one tension that seemed to come up again and again since my childhood was jealousy, or a sense of being shrunk down, one could say. And so the mistake I made as a child often was trying my best not to make them jealous, not to make them feel small, and I betrayed myself in doing that. I think about, well, too many examples, but high school to be particular about it, where at this point in my life I am in my journalism class. To be completely transparent, I am the only junior in this journalism class. And to be even more transparent than that, my articles are getting placed in the city's newspaper every month. Was it week? It's month, right? Whichever the case. I'm technically an editor on this paper. I'm a good writer, to put it simply. And I'm not seeing this as a matter of prestige for myself. I'm not seeing this as a matter of merit for myself. I am just doing it because it is something to do, and while I'm doing it, I'm failing to see that the guy I called a friend at the time was envious of the fact that I could do this. He didn't say it, of course. He would never have admitted it. But his behavior changed in the way that it does when people are envious. When they need to tear you down because they can't measure up themselves. Where they're constantly trying to prove they're superior to you in one form or another. With the hopes, the dark hopes, that you will never be better than them in their chosen field. They have to live there, build their castle there, and say, so long as you can't knock my castle down, you can't feel confident in yourself. I didn't really pick up on his envy because it's like, why would you be envious when writing isn't your field? When you're not even all that interested in school? When you're more into this or that rather than, well, what I'm interested in? Why would you be envious? when you are, well, you. Logically, that's where my mind would go. Why would anyone ever be envious of something that they don't truly want? And there's a lot of sociological reasons behind that, psychological reasons too. But the point was that he was envious. Ooh, and he couldn't really stomach that. Still, this envy would come up again and again, and I would try my best to shrink down, make myself packageable, make myself easily digestible, so that the people who I'm supposed to be calling my friends will be comfortable with my expense. And each time they're failing, or I suppose they're proving that they can't. And so long as I'm here trying to be myself or desiring to be myself, I'm always proving that I can't. We're not meant to be friends. And there is a pure lesson in that, because you're not supposed to be friends with everybody. You can't be friends with everybody. God forbid you even try. So when you reach that point where it's like, I'm sitting here amongst these guys who are just talking about sports, you're supposed to say to yourself, oh, these aren't the people for me, and keep going. And acknowledge, of course, that you might have to keep going a lot back and forth to different places, meeting new people. You have to keep moving, because moving is really the only thing you can do until you find a place you're meant to be in. And when you do get there, there's not much else you have to think about. So I think to myself, I failed. Except, no. Not in a sense of trial and error, but in the sense of self-definition, of self-awareness, where I can say with certainty, I know what I don't want to be around, even in that anime group. Not around the people who are just into sports, or will turn the anime meetup into a sports talk, but also not the people who are only interested in anime from the surface position. For both of these, it is fine for them. They may do what they desire. They may do what strengthens their bond. But the key is never to lie to myself. It is to go show up as myself. Definitely. Always do that first. Go show up as myself and decide, is this a place for me? Is this a place I want to be? If it's not, the purpose of friendships is that you get to pick and choose them. And that means picking what works for you. I think sometimes people have the wrong idea about what relationships are supposed to be. It's less about the quality and more about the quantity. The ability to say you have this rather than you have something good. You're not lonely because you have all these people around you, except There's a difference between being lonely and being alone. You're alone when you have no one else around you. You're lonely when you're surrounded by people you're not meant to be around. This is this is true in the case of platonic relationships and romantic ones, but today I'm talking about platonic ones, and yeah, that was what I had to learn. I'm still at this place where I'm trying to make it work for me. Figure out how to show up as myself rather than the nervous one or the quiet one or the anxious one, and see if people can meet that person, can hold that person in their life. I feel that it's going to be a long road, but one doesn't walk it by dwelling in the past. At a time, I mourned because I had no friends. And then, recently, it struck me that to have them, one must seek them out. There's really nothing else to that. You go and you go and you go until you find that spot. So I must go. And once I'm done, well, I guess I'll report back on my findings. But to wrap this up in a pretty bow, always go. Always be aware when the place you're at isn't the place for you. Always give yourself the tools, the awareness to keep looking. Otherwise, you might find yourself in company you really shouldn't keep. But perhaps I would be delighted if you were to join me once again.